Here are 5 very compelling reasons why you should have a spray deck for your canoe.
My name's Kesting, and I've worked as a canoe guide, a raft guide. I've taken friends and family out into the wilderness, and I've also spent hundreds of days completely alone out on wilderness canoe trips of my own, some of which got documented in books like Perseverance, Life and Death in the Subarctic. And I want to go through the 5 main reasons why Spraydecks, which is a piece of fabric that you attach onto the top of your canoe, can be really important in keeping you safe and also making you more effective when you're out in a boat in the wilderness. Number 1 is safety out on lakes. And it's hard to overestimate this. Everybody underestimates the danger of large lakes, but they are statistically the most dangerous thing that you're going to encounter in the wilderness. It's not bears, it's not whitewater, it's not lightning, it's large lakes. So a couple of years ago, I was out on Newellton Lake. And this is a very large, very remote lake that straddles the border between Manitoba in Canada and Nunavut. So the bottom part of the lake is in the forest, the top part of the lake is in the tundra, out past the tree line. Up near the top, to cross from the western shore to the eastern shore, which you have to do at some point, it's a crossing. It's about a mile long, call it 1.5 kilometers. And I remember sitting on the western shore, looking out at the sky, and seeing a couple of clouds, but the weather looked pretty stable, and I headed out. And of course, as soon as I headed out, the wind just picked up a little bit. I was like, oh boy, I better hustle. So paddling as hard as I could. In the time that it took to paddle about a mile, call it 15 minutes, the weather went from calm to really very stormy. And the whole entire time I was thinking about a famous tragedy in canoeing history, which happened on Lake Temiskaming, far to the south. It was a trip run by the St. John's School of Alberta, which is a reform school for young boys, which incidentally one of my delinquent younger brothers went to for a couple of months. And they headed out onto a large lake with 27 or 28 people, and 13 of them ended up drowning that day. And you don't have comparable drownings in whitewater. Yes, people do drown in whitewater, but not nearly as many. And yeah, people do get eaten by bears, but it's pretty rare. Statistically, large lakes are by far the most dangerous thing that you can do. Now, a spray deck is not a cure-all, but a spray deck keeps the water out. So when the waves start getting big and start breaking and start filling up your boat, well, because you've got a spray deck, it doesn't fill up your boat, or at least not nearly as much, leaving you higher in the water, more able to maneuver, more able to turn, and less likely to get swamped. Furthermore, that deck across the top of the boat makes you a little bit more wind resistant. It gives the wind a little bit less surface area, a little bit less friction to blow you in the wrong direction. Even if it's a quiet day out on a big lake, I like to have my spray deck on just in case the weather picks up. Number 2 is pretty obvious, whitewater. There are a couple of ways that you can end up out of your boat in whitewater. Of course, you can flip over, you can hit a rock, you can get knocked out by a sweeper or a branch, but a very common way to end up swimming in whitewater is just gradually taking on water. You go through a big set of waves, it fills up your boat a little bit. You punch through a ledge, it fills up your boat a little bit. You go blunder into a hole, and even if you manage to get out, it's still going to fill your boat up a little bit. And eventually, your boat just fills up and becomes lower and lower in the water. It's either going to start hitting rocks that would have floated over before, or just sinks. So that spray deck adds a whole level of safety. In fact, it changes how you run whitewater. You might start aiming deliberately for those ledges, going, yeah, I know that the front of the boat's briefly going to go underwater here, but because I've got the spray deck, most of that water will wash off. It makes large waves, although you still have a tipping hazard, much less dangerous overall, because that chance of slowly filling up goes away. So I know that for me, especially on longer trips and especially on the larger volume rivers, a spray deck really makes me feel a lot safer in whitewater. Now, you might be able to say, yeah, Stefan, you should just portage anything you don't feel safe in. But if you decide to portage every single rapid, that immediately rules out a vast percentage of the trips that I'm interested in and a vast percentage of the trips in North America. If you're on a trip that's hundreds of miles long, if you portage around each one of them, you might turn a 2-week trip into a 2-month trip. You have to have some whitewater skills if you're going to be doing these rivers. And on most whitewater, maybe not the super shallow whitewater, But anything that starts being a little bit bigger, a spray deck is a huge advantage. Number 3 is keeping you warmer and keeping hypothermia at bay. People underestimate this, but when you think about it, if we're hiking, we're using large muscles, the muscles in our legs, to move along, and that's going to keep us warm because those large muscles are working and generating heat. Paddling is almost the opposite. We're taking these small muscles and we're working, even if we include the torso in our strokes. The large parts of our body are sitting there idle, and thus we don't generate as much heat. Furthermore, we're out on lakes, typically, where there's going to be more wind. And it can get really cold, even if you're wearing rain gear, even if you're wearing windbreaker layers. So taking half of your body, the lower half of your body, and putting it into an area where you're not getting blasted by wind can really keep you a lot warmer. I remember one trip when I couldn't put my spray deck on my canoe, taking a sail that I had and wrapping it around my legs, trying to make a leg burrito just to stop the wind from carrying away all my body warmth. If I had been able to put a spray deck on the boat at that point, I couldn't because there was too much stuff in the boat. And the spray deck was a certain design that couldn't become convex very much. It would kind of go straight across. If I had had a spray deck, I would have been significantly warmer, and that would have provided a buffer against hypothermia. A fourth advantage is that a spray deck keeps your gear dry. Now, ideally, most of your gear is going to be in waterproof bags or in waterproof barrels or in something that's waterproof. But if you're just taking a sweater on and off, or a windbreaker layer on and off, or a raincoat on and off, it's a pain to open up some bag and stuff it in. With a spray deck, you can just jam it underneath. And if you're working with, say, an old school Duluth bag, an old school canvas bag, that spray deck is going to keep it dry. Even if it's drizzling or you go through a little shower, it's going to keep your gear drier. At the end of the day, maybe you'll be able to work with dry gear. It certainly is a convenience. Number 5 is an interesting one. A spray deck is a large piece of fabric, typically red or yellow. Those are the colors that I prefer. Why? Because those can be large signaling devices. If you have to hit the button on your GPS, the emergency button, or you get on the sat phone and you say, we can't continue, I have a really bad fever, or my paddling partner has broken their leg. It can be hard for a bush pilot to find you out there in the landscape, especially if your canoe isn't brightly colored. But if you have this large colored piece of fabric, it's a good signaling device, it's a good emergency tarp, and you can even turn it into a tent. If you take the canoe and tip it over and prop it up a little bit and take the spray deck out and pin that down, it's not perfect, it doesn't keep the bugs out, but it will keep the rain off. And in a worst case scenario, it can function as a tent to keep hypothermia at bay, keep you warm. So those are the reasons for having a spray deck. The only reason to not have one, number 1, if you're doing a really easy trip. Number 2, if you're on a trip where you've got to get in and out of the boat a lot. If you're doing a series of smaller lakes and you're doing short portages and you're always in, out, then maybe it doesn't make sense. Also, if you're going upriver, this is a pretty rare thing nowadays, but the people on the cutting edge of canoeing, their trips do tend to connect watersheds. And if you're connecting watersheds, then you do have to go upriver as well as downriver. So when I'm going upriver, I don't typically have my spray deck on my boat because I'm continuously in and out of the boat, either jumping out to wade the boat up by hand, jumping out to find a portage, jumping out to use ropes to line my boat upriver. The last thing you need in a situation like that is a tripping hazard. And the final reason maybe is cost and weight. The cost is legitimate. I have sewn my own spray decks, but it takes a lot of time. And I have bought spray decks, some of them costing as much as just under $2,000 because they were highly customized to the needs that I had. So it is an additional expense. Now you can make your own spray deck. When I made my own spray deck, I followed the plans in an earlier version of Cliff Jacobson's excellent Canoeing Wild Rivers book. That's got one of the best designs in it for making your own spray deck. And I've actually got an entire other video just about choosing spray decks and the benefits and the drawbacks of the different designs. I'll link to that right at the end, as well as a trailer to my book, Perseverance, Life and Death in the Subarctic, which you could check out if you want to get the quick video synopsis of that story. Thanks so much. Enjoy the wilderness and be safe out there.
Canoeing is fun! Here's why you should have a spray deck for your canoe for every wilderness trip. Here are 5 very compelling reasons why you should have a spray deck for your canoe.